Corey bought a huge piece of land 35 years ago. It was a rocky piece of landscape that nobody wanted. He had built a house on it and lived there with his family. But the land was so big, Corey never explored every part of it. For a year now, he's been exploring his own land, and he has found multiple bizarre things. But this day Corey found something that shocked him to his core. It looked like military equipment. What was this doing here, and for how long was it laying here already? Then he thought of his old friend, who was a general now. Corey called his old friend and explained what he found. The general's reaction was shocking. "Corey, move away as quietly as possible. You were never supposed to find this." Corey still had a hard time believing that he had in fact been targeting with this military weapon, and that he had just been incredible luckily that the weapon had malfunctioned on impact. Otherwise, he probably would not have been here anymore. He had never expected this, but when he discovered who was actually responsible for sending the weapon his way, he could not say that he was entirely surprised. He was clearly in danger, but it was also obvious that he could not deal with this threat alone. When the U.S. military heard about his find, they wasted no time in taking action. With the weapon still intact, they finally had the proof they needed. But who targeted Farmer Corey with the military weapon? How had it ended up on his land? And what was the U.S. military going to do? When Farmer Corey was plowing his fields, he noticed something in the distance he had never seen before. He saw a big piece of green metal sticking out from the ground. Corey headed over to see what it was. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't just a loose piece of metal lying around. It was a big metal capsule filled with little dark green balls. Corey was unsure about what the balls could be, but when he crouched down to pick one up, he quickly realized it was something very dangerous. The capsule was filled with hand grenades. There were probably 50 of them, all piled up and ready to explode. Corey pulled his hand back and took a few steps backward. Unsure what to do next, he carefully walked back to the capsule and looked if the pins were still intact. To his relief, he saw that the pins were still in place, so he knew that the grenades were safe for the time being. He wondered why this capsule suddenly lay in his field. He had never seen it before, so maybe someone had dumped it there recently. Or could it have been there for a long time? Corey could not be sure, but then he noticed something. In the corner of the capsule was something engraved. It was very hard to read, as the rust had grown over it. But Corey could make out 2 letters and a few numbers. He ran inside to get a notepad and wrote everything down. Corey looked at the numbers but had no idea what they could be. He put his tractor back in the bar, tied a string around the capsule so he would always be able to see where it was, and went inside his farm. He thought about calling the police, but Corey had always loved going on adventures or solving difficult riddles. And he also didn't want the bomb squad involved. They would take over his farm and probably destroy his crops with their cars while they removed the capsule. No, Corey definitely didn't want that. So, there was only one thing he could do. Solve this mystery on his own, no matter how dangerous it could get. Suddenly it dawned on Corey. This might be a dangerous mission. The grenades might still be active, so he couldn't take one with him. And maybe the owner doesn't want to be found. But then he got himself together and sat up straight in his chair. "I'm going to do this." He went back outside to the capsule and took a few photos of it. He made sure to really capture every detail so he could zoom in if he needed. When he felt he had enough, he went back inside and typed the initials into his computer. He hoped to find at least a name, but sadly, nothing came up. Corey couldn't shake the excited feeling he got from this sudden mystery. He loved his life as a farmer, but it wasn't as thrilling as he'd like. This mystery gave him a purpose. He sat on his kitchen table, still looking at the numbers. He tried calling them to see if it was a phone number, but that was also a fail. There were a few numbers missing too. He only wrote down the numbers he saw clearly at that moment. So he opened one of the photos and zoomed in. Now he was able to make out a few more numbers, and even the more letters. An N in the middle and a W at the end. Suddenly, Corey realized what the letters meant. N stood for north, and W stood for west. They were coordinates. Corey was very excited about his first discovery. After that, he decoded the other letters, and soon he had all the coordinates he needed. He typed them into Google but was surprised with what he saw. The coordinates led to a thick forest somewhere in Utah. It would be a long drive if he wanted to go over there, but he knew there was no other way. This was the only lead he had at this moment, so he had to follow it. He knew it would be a long drive, so he decided to take his old pickup truck. He filled the gas tank and packed a cooler with food and drinks. He also brought a map and compass, just in case his GPS failed. The drive was long and monotonous, but Corey was determined to reach his destination. He passed through small towns and rural areas, and the scenery changed from lush green fields to dense forests. The road was winding and bumpy, and he had to navigate through potholes and mud. But finally, after several hours of driving, he reached the coordinates. He found himself in the middle of the forest, and there was no sign of a road or a path. So, he parked his truck and put on his hiking boots. He followed the compass, and the coordinates seemed to lead him deeper into the forest. He had to climb over fallen trees and navigate through thick underbrush. He also had to be careful of the animals that roamed the forest. He encountered a deer, but he managed to scare it away. As he walked, he started to notice signs of human activity. He saw old, rusty cans and broken bottles. He also found old campfire sites and empty bullet casings. He knew he was getting close to something, and after hours of hiking, he finally arrived at a spot deep in the forest. There, he found an old, abandoned bunker. It was clear that it had been untouched for decades, but Corey could sense that there was something important inside. To his surprise, he could easily open the door. The place was humid, and it smelled old and musty. But Corey felt like he was just where he needed to be. Inside the bunker, it was dusty and dark. Luckily, Corey had taken a flashlight with him. As he turned it on and looked through the bunker, he was amazed. He was transported right back in time to all those years ago, and he almost expected another soldier to walk right through the door. He looked around and found various things that the soldiers had left behind. Some uniforms and helmets, empty food cans, and medical supplies. He even found a radio that still seemed to work, but of course, he could only hear static noise. But then, he came across something that took his breath away. Photographs and letters. He found a pile of what seemed to be personal belongings of soldiers who had spent a lot of time here. Photographs, letters, and notebooks. He took a look at the pile of letters and flipped through them, imagining what their life was like and how excited they must have felt when they received another letter. As Corey looked at the letters, a piece of paper fell out of the pile and on the floor. It caught his attention, and he grabbed it, curious to see what he would find on it. Once he realized what he was looking at, he was surprised. His adventure would not come to an end yet. The piece of paper that he had picked up from the floor contained some more information that he had never expected to find. It was a map. Corey had no idea where it would lead him, but after taking a first look at it, he determined that it shouldn't be far from the bunker. He thought about what he was going to do next. Would he follow the map? He knew it was getting more and more dangerous, but he was just too excited. He had already come this far, and he did not want to give up now. He was curious to see where this adventure would lead him. He called his wife to tell her he would be home late today, and he sat down on the grass outside of the bunker to have a good look at this map. It wasn't very detailed, but it clearly showed the bunker and a nearby river. And something was marked with a big, red X. What did the X mean? Corey tried figuring out what it meant, but without any luck. He turned the map around and looked at it from various angles. He held it up against the sunlight. He tried everything he could think of. But no matter what he tried, he couldn't get any wiser about what the X was supposed to be. So there was only one thing left for him to do. He needed to follow the map. He grabbed his flashlight and compass. as well as the map he had brought from home. He looked at the route once again, and he immediately knew where he needed to start. Corey decided to start his journey by finding the river first. From there, it should be easy to follow the rest of the path. Once again, he found himself walking through the thick forest, stepping through bushes and over fallen trees. Suddenly, the sound of insects and birds was interrupted by something else. He found it. He heard water running somewhere nearby. This had to mean that he was closer to the river. He had a feeling that he was almost there. He walked towards the sound as it grew louder and louder, and not much later, he saw the river flowing through the forest. He marked the spot on his own map as well, just in case. He could never be too safe. His map contained more details about the area, whereas the map he had found in the bunker only showed a few of the spots that the soldiers had marked. He walked along the river for a while, but suddenly he was taken by surprise. According to the map, he had arrived at a point where he could cross it. There was supposed to be a bridge. But Corey looked around, and he just couldn't find it. It wasn't there anymore. After a while, he realized that the bridge had been there before. He could see the remains on both sides of the river. But it was gone now. This map must have been drawn even longer ago than he first thought. But that wasn't his biggest worry right now. Corey tried to come up with a plan. There had to be something he could do. It would be such a waste if he had to stop here and return home. The adventurer in him was not going to give up. So he walked around a bit, looking for something that could help him right now. Corey didn't want to swim. The river wasn't very wide, and it didn't seem very deep either, but Corey didn't want to take the risk. To his embarrassment, he had never learned how to swim very well. And until now, it had never been much of an issue. But now it certainly was an inconvenience. He had swum a couple of times before, but never alone. And to make it even worse, the river seemed pretty fast-flowing. Corey preferred finding a way to make it to the other side safely and with dry clothes, without needing to rely on the swimming lessons he took as a kid all those years ago. So he had to find another way. Luckily for him, there were a couple of big tree branches lying nearby. He could definitely work with these. He made a plan and quickly got to work. He had never been in this forest before, and he wanted to be home before dark. He knew it would be difficult to find his way back in the dark, and he didn't want to risk it if he didn't have to. A while later, his improvised bridge was finally done. He wanted to make sure it was sturdy enough to not only withstand his weight, but also the stream. Once Corey had confirmed that the bridge was really safe enough for him to cross, he grabbed his things and safely put them away in his pockets and his shirt. He needed his hands to be free so he could keep his balance while making his way across the river. As first, he was a bit afraid. The river was flowing rapidly, and he already imagined himself falling into it. But after a few steps, he became more confident and determined. He had almost arrived at the other side and was ready to celebrate his small victory of the day when something happened. Just as Corey was about to step on the last branch, it got pulled away by the strong current. Corey lost his balance and almost fell straight into the water, but luckily, he was able to save himself. He quickly jumped forward and landed on the riverbed. Even though his shoes and trousers had gotten wet, he had made it to the other side. Corey took a minute to catch his breath, and as he thought about the events of the day, a big smile appeared on his face. He felt like a little kid going on a treasure hunt. And he had just overcome his first obstacle. He felt a rush of adrenaline, and he was ready to continue his adventure. He quickly checked the map again, and he started walking. As he continued, the path almost disappeared again. The forest and the bushes became thicker, and he had to really fight his way through. He had no idea whether he was going in the right direction, but he would soon find out. Suddenly, Corey found himself in an open space. It was very unexpected because the forest around it was so dense, but it was a beautiful sight. And when he checked the map to see how much there was left until the marked X, he couldn't believe his eyes. He had arrived. According to the map, he had arrived already. He was standing right on the spot marked by the X. He was beside himself with excitement. Was he going to find what he was looking for? But what was he even looking for in the first place? He had no idea. He decided to just look around the area and see if he would find anything that seemed out of place. But after an hour or so, he still hadn't found anything. This can't be right, he thought. Surely there must be something here. Why else would this exact spot be marked on that map? Suddenly, something caught his eye. He noticed something else on the map that he hadn't seen before. He must have thought it was just a smudge at first, but now that he had spotted it, it was as clear as day. Corey couldn't believe that he had missed this. He saw a little triangle right next to the X. This definitely had to mean something. Corey was determined to find out what it was, even though he was slowly running out of time. If he wanted to be back home before dark, he had to be quick. As he studied his surroundings, he kept looking for something triangular. A sign carved into something, or some kind of box hidden under the leaves. But there was nothing. Triangles aren't shapes you often come across in nature. However, he did notice something else that caught his attention. A large rock. There was a huge rock. It was fairly big and remarkable, seeing that it was surrounded by green. Corey tried picking it up or moving it, but he couldn't. Was it really possible that this was it? Had he figured it out? He wasn't sure, but he needed to try something in order to find out. Corey took a few steps back and measured something with his feet. He walked back and forth over the same path a few times, just to be sure of it. And the longer he thought about it, the more certain he became that this was it. He had found the triangle. As he was looking at the big rock, he noticed two more rocks in its vicinity, a couple of feet apart. And soon he realized that together the three rocks formed a triangle. Corey realized the X must be in the middle of the triangle. He started digging, and so he measured and calculated the middle, and once he was sure he had found the right spot, he started digging with his bare hands. He would have brought a shovel, but he didn't know he would need it. He ripped the grass and the plants out of the soil, curious to see what he would find underneath. After a while, he felt something hard. He stopped digging to take a better look at it, and as he wiped the earth off the surface, he realized that he had found a box. The map was real, and he had finally found the X. He couldn't believe it and quickly continued digging, eager to open up this box. A few minutes later, Corey was holding the box in his hands. He looked at it with a flicker in his eyes. He was so excited to finally see what was inside. He put it down on the ground before him and held his breath while he slowly lifted the lid. He was amazed by what he saw inside the box. It were personal belongings of one of the soldiers. He found photos, letters, and even a journal. He would have loved to read it all immediately, but he decided to head home and take the box with him. This way, he would have a look at it at home, and he wouldn't have to hurry. He quickly gathered all his things and started his way home. Once he got to the river, he was able to easily restore the bridge and cross it. From there, he walked directly to his truck and drove home. It was getting dark already, but Corey had made it out of the woods safely. After a while, he finally arrived home. He was tired and had actually planned to look through the box the next day, but he couldn't wait that long. He spent the entire night reading those letters and the journal, which contained many stories about what that soldier had been through during the war. By the end of it, Corey felt like he had known this man personally, and it was all connected to that capsule on his property as well. He had found the coordinates of the bunker on it with the letters JG, and this box had belonged to someone named JG as well. Corey decided to contact the local authorities in hopes of finding JG's family, and to his surprise, it worked. Apparently, JG had gone missing during the war, and his family was overjoyed to have some of his old belongings back. They were very thankful for Corey, and they became good friends. That same day, the police came to Corey's house and removed the capsule from his garden, and Corey himself was happy to have experienced such an adventure. He had never expected a day of exploring his own land to end like this. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation,